Maud Lewis is an artist that we've long promoted for almost 30 years. We've bought and sold the pieces and watched the sort of demand and interest in her work kind of grow from there. But you would often see one painting or two paintings, maybe we would have two or three. We've mounted a couple other exhibitions of her work at our Toronto location, but it's the first time we've actually done the exhibition here in Winnipeg. Maud Lewis started her career as a painter in the 1930s. She grew up in rural Nova Scotia. She had a very happy life as a kid growing up. Her father was a blacksmith, and a lot of the imagery from her paintings comes from her memories as a child and just the things that she witnessed from the very agricultural roots of the province. People who farmed in the land and harvested in the ocean. And, that's where she took her inspiration. She had a very creative spark early on and, gave herself over to painting at an early age. We consider her a folk artist. A folk artist just means that she was essentially self-taught. She didn't have any sort of formal background or formal schooling or education that kind of taught her conventional ideas about painting or drawing or draftsmanship or how you use paint or how you mix paint. Her approach to making art was entirely something she discovered on her own. And, her work is very, I would describe, self-determined. And, but out of that, she carved out a body of work that is very identifiably hers. And, you'll never mistake a Maud Lewis for any other painter. They're recognizable a mile away. And which is a very difficult thing to do for someone that's, doesn't often have a formal background to kind of create a body of work that's really remarkably consistent and colorful and very much her own. Her career kind of began in the late 1930s, and she actually enjoyed a long career as an artist. She made work predominantly from the late 30s through the 1940s, 1950s, and the 1960s, all the way up to her passing in 1970. And she found wide recognition for her work. As the paintings here in this exhibition kind of cover all periods of her career. There isn't anything in the room which is really early, but the earliest painting we have is just around the corner over here. It's an image of a fisherman. And that painting would be from the 1940s. And if you've studied the work and the type of work that she was producing in that period, a lot of the early paintings from the 40s tended to focus on dock life, harbors, and the sort of activities around harvesting along the water. The color is a bit different. So if you look at it from the point of view of like the colors, it's slightly different from the work that we see from the 1950s and 60s. Her ability to find paint and materials to work on wasn't quite as easy in the 1940s. But as she began to sell work in the 1940s, they provided an income that allowed her to go out and buy more, material and painting supplies so that she could continue to work. Her subject matter really started to develop through the 40s and the 50s. And she was attracted to, things that she found interesting. Everything was painted from memory. She didn't have photographs. She didn't have the aid of a camera to kind of record things and then take that back into the studio and emulate it. So, the work really comes directly out of her imagination. As her career took off in the 1940s, they started to kind of market themselves. Her and her husband Everett, Maud would actually sit out on the side of the highway with paintings around here to sort of attract an audience or attract people to stop and visit and see the work. They eventually made a sign called Paintings for Sale, and they hung it outside. And that was the way they kind of attracted people to visit. Her first collectors were mostly Americans or people that came seasonally to the Maritimes, tourists and Americans and people that had maybe summer homes. And I'd like to think that when they went there and sort of discovered Maud Lewis, her work was kind of symbolic of the experience they were always hoping to find, maybe why they had property there or why they were vacationing. She wasn't widely collected across the country until sort of later in her career. But about 1964, CBC did a documentary which was broadcast nationally where they visited the studio, interviewed her. You can actually go online on YouTube and you can watch that video. And it's kind of nice because there's an interview with her communicating, talking about her work, and also there's a discussion about, there's photographs of her painting. And at that stage, collectors across the country were kind of exposed, and the market really took off for her, where people would start to mail in and write to acquire works.